Eimantas Stanionis.
Jaron Boots Ennis.
Make sure y'all stay on point with
The Puncher's Point. What is good, y'all? Welcome back to The Puncher's Point. Now, it's been a minute since we've been on YouTube. The last episode we made, it was a podcast exclusive only. It was on all podcast platforms, Ready Review number 4. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you definitely go and check that out. But regardless, we're here to talk about Jaron Boots Ennis versus Eimantas Stanionis for the WBA and the IBF Welterweight Championship. All I can say is let's go. This is going to be a big fight for the welterweight division. And on top of that, it's going to be a very, very big fight for both these guys' legacies. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But overall, let's talk about this division really quickly before we get into the weaknesses and the strengths of both fighters and the overall betting odds and the predictions and all that type of stuff. So there's 4 champions in this division right now. We got Jaron Boots Ennis and we got Eimantas Stanionis, who are going to be fighting in Atlantic City April 12th. And overall, that's going to be a great bout. That's going to unify some belts. But then you have Brian Norman, who just came off of a very, very impressive win over David Cuevas. I mean, he made him look like an amateur. And David Cuevas is a guy who never been knocked out before, never been knocked down. And he overall made it look too easy. And then you have Mario Barrios, who was in a grueling war against Abel Ramos, where that fight ended up in a draw. And it was on the Jake Paul, Mike Tyson card. But that fight was a great fight. However, it wasn't a good look for Mario Barrios. So you have 4 champions in this welterweight division, and overall, somebody's got to be the number 1 guy. And whoever wins this fight, I said it when the fight was announced, will be the number 1 guy in this division. But overall, the strengths and the weaknesses. Obviously, Jaron Boots Ennis will be the favorite, and we'll get in touch with a lot of that. We'll get into detail with a lot of that as far as the betting odds later on in this episode. But overall, how much of a shot does Eimantas Stanionis have, and is this going to be a cakewalk for Boots, or could we possibly see an upset? Stay tuned. With that being said, let's get straight into Jaron Boots Ennis. We're going to talk about his strengths. So if I'm over here, if I'm looking at his strengths, first things first is versatility. I mean, Jaron Boots Ennis can punish you in any single way. I mean, this guy on top of that is a switch hitter. Now, there's not many switch hitters in boxing today. But Jaron Boots Ennis, whether he's orthodox or southpaw, can beat you either way. And I think that's what makes Jaron Boots Ennis so dangerous. We could talk about his resume all we like. Okay, overall, he's got some decent names on the resume. I mean, Thomas Delorme, he's got Roman Villa, he's got Sergey Lipnis. He's got some decent names on this resume. Chukhadzhian, Avanesian. Now, look, I'm not really going to count Avanesian. I don't really think Avanesian is all that. But regardless, he's got some names on his resume. It's just not what you call the A-level names, the B-level names. They're kind of like C, C+, all that type of stuff. But regardless, I would say his versatility and his craftiness, that is what makes Jaron Boots Ennis Jaron Boots Ennis. I've said it before. To me, when I see him fight, he reminds me of Roy Jones Jr., who's my favorite fighter, which is why I really am hooked on Jaron Ennis. However, with that being said, he is not Roy Jones. He is not a prime Roy Jones by no means. He is really good. I will say that. Jaron Boots Ennis is very good. He could beat you with a left hand, a right hand. He could beat you with a hook to the body, straights, jabs. Whatever punch you can think of, Jaron Boots Ennis has it in his offensive arsenal. I can argue, and I made this argument in the Reddit review, that he is maybe one of the best offensive fighters in today's boxing. Now, I didn't have him as the number 1 offensive fighter. I didn't really mention him in that episode. However, while I have the chance, Jaron Boots Ennis is a tremendous offensive fighter. I will say that right now. The other thing about Jaron Boots Ennis is he's very patient. You see, a lot of people don't see that part. He's a very, very patient fighter. If you look at Jaron Boots Ennis, when he's going on the attack, he's not piecing up 2, 3, 4 punch combinations. It's usually just a good 1-2 punch to get his opponents hurt, and then overall he just charges and he takes attack. Kind of like a shark. But overall, that's who he is. You know, he basically lurks. He waits for his moments. He picks his shots very, very well. He lands maybe a good 2 punches, hurts his opponent, and then he goes straight for the kill. And that's what I really like about Jaron Boots Ennis. He's patient. He doesn't go in there and just go all or nothing on every single attack. The other thing about Jaron Boots Ennis is he's very good at opening up opponents' holes. He's very good at opening up the holes in opponents' game plans. You see a lot of opponents, you know, they feel like they have the way to beat Jaron Boots Ennis, and some have had success, not going to lie. Some have had their moments and everything like that. But nobody's really beaten Jaron Boots Ennis. I mean, the guy's had 30 fights. 27 of them by knockout. I mean, Jaron Boots Ennis is a great fighter. Don't get me wrong. But here's the thing with Jaron Boots Ennis. Jaron Boots Ennis, when we're really looking at him, when we're talking about him as a fighter, he's very good at just forcing opponents to give in, and he's really good at just picking his punches and breaking through guards and basically imposing his will on the opponent that he fights. See, if you go and you look at a lot of Jaron Boots Ennis fights, you can tell who's in charge. It's clearly him. And then on top of that, a lot of these fights, he looks a lot more physically imposing than his opponent would. He looks like he is the bigger fighter in that ring, and I do believe that has an advantage, and I believe he is potentially the bigger fighter in that ring, and I believe that has an advantage on Jaron Boots Ennis just bullying his opponents. The other thing about him is he's got very, very good footwork. I will say that Jaron Boots Ennis, he's very, very quick when we're talking about slipping to the outside. When he's fighting on the outside, he's really good at basically cutting angles and moving around his opponent, circling his opponent. That's what Jaron Boots Ennis is really, really good at. And like I said, I do believe he is one of the best offensive fighters in today's game. I do believe he's one of the best offensive fighters in today's boxing. I'm going to say that right now. So what are the weaknesses? Well, look, Jaron Boots Ennis, he's got decent defense. However, the problem with Jaron Boots Ennis is I feel like he comes into these fights and basically he feels like he's just gonna physically impose his opponent in every single second, and that's not the case. You're not gonna physically enforce your will every single second. So what happens? He goes into the inside. He ends up trying to throw more than what he should, kind of risking putting himself at risk a little bit, and he get clipped with punches that he shouldn't be getting clipped with. There's certain punches that he likes to go to, and if you go back to the Karen Chukhadzhian fight that he had, the second fight that he had, if you go back and you look at that, when he was fighting Karen Chukhadzhian, right in the early rounds, Karen Chukhadzhian clipped him and he rocked him, and that's because Jaron Boots Ennis wasn't expecting Karen Chukhadzhian to rock him, to counterpunch him. He was just expecting that he was going to go in there, he was going to basically get Chukhadzhian against those ropes. He was going to be the pressure fighter. He was going to push the pace. And in that moment, Karen Chukhadzhian had an answer for him. And in my opinion, that is what Jaron Boots Ennis' Achilles heel is. He has a great offensive ability, but sometimes I feel like he thinks he can do more in a moment than he can, and he just gets clipped with stupid stuff that he shouldn't be getting clipped with. The other thing about Jaron Boots Ennis, what I noticed is, like I said, I compared him to Roy Jones Jr. a lot. But the difference is Roy Jones Jr. was very good at resetting after throwing a combination, after landing an attack. He was very good at resetting. He was very good at knowing, okay, I landed this 2-3 punch combination. Now I'm going to reset. Now I'm going to basically I landed my 3-4 punch combination. Instead of like sticking my punches, I'm gonna land the 3-4 punch combination and I'm gonna back away as quick as I can, or I'm going to reset. Jaron Boots Ennis, when it comes to his hands, he doesn't reset. Sometimes I feel like his hands kind of like his punches kind of stick a little too long, and it gives his opponents enough time to counter him. I think that's how Chukhadzhian got him in that moment as well. So for me, it's not the same as Roy Jones Jr. Roy Jones Jr. would reset before his opponent even knew what was going on. Jaron Boots Ennis, sometimes it takes him a second or two later to reset his hands, to get back into his fighting stance, to get back into his boxing form. And in my opinion, that is going to be a problem for Jaron Boots Ennis in this fight against somebody like Stanionis. The other weaknesses that he has, I just feel like sometimes he tends to let his foot off the gas, kind of give his opponents a lot of opportunities to get back into the fight, and I don't like seeing that from him. His body's an easy target. I will say that right now. I thought Karen Chukhadzhian did a good job of targeting the body. Same thing with Avanesian. Avanesian did a decent job of it as well. Obviously, because Boots was clearly the aggressor in most of his fights, they didn't have many chances to target his body, but when they did, they landed successfully. And then last but not least, here is going to be the key punch. The left hook finds home on the inside. That's what I mentioned right there. The left hook finds home against Jaron Boots Ennis on the inside. I've seen it many, many times where he gets hit with that left hook. And I'm going to be on record by saying this. I'm not saying a right-handed fighter can't beat Boots, but I think a left-handed fighter has a better chance at beating Boots, if that makes any sense. Now, what does that mean? Well, the three other champions in this division are all orthodox fighters, which means they're all right-handed fighters. So I'm not saying that these right-handed fighters don't have a chance to beat Boots. They absolutely do. But that left hook finds home. And I expect that left hook to be landed by a southpaw fighter, a left-handed fighter. So with that being said, I don't expect a right-handed fighter to make it an easy fight against Boots. I expect a left-handed fighter to have a lot of success because left-handed fighters, I believe, have a better shot of landing that left hook. That's just my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but that left hook usually finds home against Jaron Ennis. So, with that being said, let's get to Stanionis. The Stanionis have a chance. Obviously, he's going to be the underdog in this fight, but does he have a chance? And overall, could we possibly see an upset? Stanionis, 15-0, 9 knockouts. So let's get into the strengths for Eimantas Stanionis. You see, when both of these guys fight, I will say Boots is more crafty. Stanionis loves to fight onto the inside more. But overall, these two have very similar fighting styles. These two have very similar, offensive arsenals. I would give the advantage to Boots, obviously, but overall, Stanionis got a pretty similar arsenal. Brutal body puncher, just like Boots Ennis is. They're both brutal body punchers. Stanionis is a body first puncher, and you don't see many of those in today's boxing. He is a body first puncher. If he has a choice between the body and the head, he's going to go straight to the body. That's the way Stanionis is. So I will say that he's a body first puncher, and he is a brutal body puncher at that. He has a monster right hook. And I'm going to say this right now. Even though I think the left hook is the weakness for Jaron Boots Ennis, he shouldn't be overlooking that right hook that Stanionis has. If Stanionis lands a right hook, mark my words, you're going to see a surprise knockdown. Because I do believe that Stanionis is that good of a fighter. If Jaron Boots Ennis takes it easy on him and Stanionis lands that right when he doesn't expect it, Jaron Boots Ennis will go down, in my opinion. Now, again, this is all hearsay. That's my prediction. I could be wrong. But overall, that right hook, Boots better prepare for it. He's aggressive on the inside. Like I said, he likes to do most of his work on the inside. However, don't think that he doesn't have good footwork and he can't fight on the outside. Stanionis can fight on the outside. He just chooses the inside. And to me, Stanionis is one of those fighters that really likes to dig, and he really likes to dig in his punches, and he really loves going to the body as much as he can. And that could be a potential tool to beat Jaron Boots Ennis. He has very, very good ring control, and he's very good at setting up his punches. So they both set up their punches in different ways. Jaron Boots Ennis is more of I'm going to force through the guard. I'm going to force you to submit. Stanionis is the type of fighter that's going to kind of try to fake you out a little bit. He's going to try to throw some feints. He's going to punch you into the body and force you to let go of your guard. He's going to force you to pick between defending your body or defending your head. So for me, Stanionis is better at setting up his punches. He's better at fakes. He's better at feints. Jaron Boots Ennis is better at forcing his way through. That is my opinion. That's what I've analyzed through their fights. With that being said, what is Stanionis' weaknesses? Well, I will say this right now. Resume. Besides Tarmas Delorme, there's really not many good fighters on Stanionis' resume. To me, it's just it wouldn't it's not really the best resume. And I believe that if he's going into this fight against somebody like Jaron Boots Ennis, who doesn't have the best resume either, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say Jaron Boots Ennis has a great resume because he doesn't. He has an okay resume. But the problem is, if you're going into this fight, if you're asking me who has a better resume, it's obviously Boots. Overall, if I had to name some notable names that Stanionis fought, Butayev, he had a split decision win against Butayev, who made it a very gritty fight for Stanionis, but Stanionis still came out on top. Tarmas Delorme, he beat him by unanimous decision. There was a no contest with Luis Collazo. Those to me would be probably his best fights, I would say. There's really not many fights where you can look at Stanionis' record and be like, oh, this guy was a big name, because there really isn't many. I mean, he's 15-0, 9 knockouts, and Stanionis is a good fighter, which is why I believe this fight is so important. So I will say the resume is one weakness. The other weakness is, just like Jaron Boots Ennis, he also has a very easy target to the body. I do believe that both of these guys are going to be digging to the body, and if Boots has a chance of winning, he has to dig to the body just as much as Stanionis does. To me, if Stanionis is going to the body and Boots isn't, this is going to be a rough fight. This is going to be a tough fight for Boots to win. He's going to have to get out the mud. But it could be a lot easier for Boots if he targets the body, just like I know Stanionis is going to. Stanionis has a very good jab. I give the advantage as far as jab to Stanionis. Stanionis has a very, very good jab. He doesn't stick. The jab does. Here's the thing with the jab. When he throws that jab, it's a very impactful jab. Okay, I will say that. It's a very, very impactful jab. When he throws that jab, it's a very, very impactful jab, and he resets a lot quicker than Jaron Boots Ennis does. But his weakness is also the jab. And for me, I feel like Jaron Boots Ennis is going to have to take advantage of that weakness. He's going to have to throw that jab a lot. I believe the jab is going to be a big key in this fight for Boots Ennis. And I could argue that the jab is going to be the most important key in this fight for Jaron Boots Ennis. And I will get in depth with that when we give out the keys to victory for both fighters. The counter right. The counter right finds home for against Stanionis. And I believe that Boots could definitely take advantage of that, especially being a switch hitter. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit with the keys to victory. But the counter right seems to find home against Stanionis. And then last but not least, he leaves his head on a line during combinations and attacks. So when you leave your head on a line, that means you're leaving it straight. You're not moving it around. You're not using any head movement. He keeps his head when he's throwing his combinations. He keeps his head straight. The head is in one place. It's not moving. So, in my opinion, that is an easy target for Jaron Boots Ennis to counter. And if Stanionis cannot go toe to toe with Boots, and he can't figure out Boots, it's going to be an easy fight for Jaron because all he has to do is find the moments where Stanionis wants to attack, and he's just going to counterpunch him. So now, with that being said, let's get to the keys to victory. What's it going to take for Boots to defeat Stanionis? Well, for me, counterpunching. Counterpunching is going to be a big tool. I believe that in order for him to win, it's not going to be enough just to be the aggressor. He's going to have to counterattack. He's going to have to stop Stanionis' momentum early. The other thing I believe he's going to have to do is I believe he's going to have to fight in the orthodox stance, which means he's going to have to fight as a right-handed fighter. Because I believe that in order for him to win, he should take advantage of the counter right. And I believe if he fights in orthodox in this fight, I believe he's going to have a lot more success than if he were to fight in southpaw. Obviously, attack the body, like I said before. And then last but not least, make sure you open some holes in Stanionis' game. And every single time you go for an attack, start with the jab. Start with the jab and use the jab to set up other punches. That would be my keys to victory for Jaron Boots Ennis. Now, what would be my keys to victory for Stanionis? Well, for Stanionis, I would say take advantage of the openings that Jaron gives you. Jaron Boots Ennis, there is going to come a time in this fight where he's going to let his foot off the gas, where he is going to get a little too greedy. Take advantage of those moments. Force him to rethink, reset. Force him to actually take the fight seriously. Use your left hook a lot more. I believe that Stanionis is going to have to use this left hook now. I don't know if that's going to be a tool that he's going to use because he is a right-handed fighter. But we'll see. He does have a decent left hook, so maybe one of those lands. Obviously, the right hook is obviously his biggest tool, but I do believe he should take advantage of that left hook as well. Target the body more, just like I said earlier in the podcast. And last but not least, set up your combinations and control the ring. I do believe that if Stanionis can control this ring, if he can set up his punches and force Jaron Boots Ennis to back up, force Jaron Boots Ennis to retreat, and kind of corner him up into the ropes or get him in that corner and start getting some exchanges in, I do believe that Stanionis is going to have a good chance of winning this fight. So with that being said, we go straight to the betting odds. Obviously, like I said, Jaron Boots Ennis is going to be the favorite for this fight. And when you go to DraftKings had Jaron Boots Ennis at we're going to get to it right now. He had Jaron Boots Ennis at minus 600, and they had Eimantas Stanionis at plus 425. So with that being said, is it worth betting on this fight? Well, first we got to look at the most likely outcome and the least likely outcome. So the most likely outcome is going to be Jaron Boots Ennis by decision at plus 110. A very close second is Ennis by knockout at plus 130, and the least likely outcome besides a draw is going to be Stanionis by knockout. So, if you ask me, who do I got win this fight? Well, look, honestly, I can see either one of these guys win this fight, and I truly do mean that. I can see Stanionis winning this fight. Obviously, Boots is the favorite, and a lot of people are picking Boots to win this fight. So, for me, what do I think is going to happen? Well, if I had to take a guess, I do believe that Jaron Boots Ennis is going to take advantage of counterpunching. I do believe in the early rounds, maybe the first 4 or 5, maybe first 6, you're gonna get some swing rounds in between there, and you're gonna have a pretty even fight. I would say like 3 rounds to 3. From the 7th on, I believe Jaron Boots Ennis is gonna control momentum. Maybe Stanionis might get one of those later rounds before the championship rounds. Maybe he'll get like round 9. But then I believe in rounds 10 or 11, I do believe that Jaron Boots Ennis is going to pick up the pace. You might even see a knockdown. And I do believe that his switch hitting is going to come in clutch. I do believe that he's going to use that jab very effectively. I believe he'll probably save it a little bit towards the end, but towards the end, as the fight progresses, Jaron Boots Ennis is going to start using that jab a lot more effectively. And I do believe that Jaron Boots Ennis is going to put the pressure on Stanionis. I believe he's going to win the championship rounds, and I think he's going to have a 117 to 110 decision. So I got Jaron Boots Ennis by unanimous decision, and he's going to become the unified WBA and IBF welterweight champion. That would be my prediction right there. Jaron Boots Ennis, unanimous decision. But overall, we shouldn't be sleeping on Stanionis. Stanionis is undefeated, 15-0 with 9 knockouts. The guy's not a joke. It's just the competition that he's fought. Is he ready to take that next step? And I'm going to explain why this fight is so important. Jaron Boots Ennis, if you hear the entire boxing fan base, all he fights is C-class fighters. And I'm going to be honest with you, they're not wrong. I like Jaron Boots Ennis. I really do. But I'm not going to lie to you. His fight against Karen Chukhadzhian was not it. His fight against Avanesian was not it. So for me, I need to see the old Boots back. I need to see the Boots that was putting dudes on their asses. That's the Boots I need to see. But we haven't seen that Boots recently. So with that being said, we got to see Jaron Boots Ennis come back in there and have a dominant performance. But he's going up against somebody like Stanionis. Now, Stanionis doesn't have a resume. He doesn't have a big name on his resume. But he is a champion. So with that being said, Stanionis, this is going to be his toughest fight. Again, he's gonna have to take advantage of every opportunity that presents himself. And I do believe that if he does that, Stanionis could have a chance to upset Boots. And like I said, I do believe that if Boots takes him lightly and he gets hit with one of those right hooks, don't be surprised if you see Boots hit the canvas. I'm just saying, both of these guys, they need this win. Stanionis needs to have a big name like Boots on his resume to be taken seriously. And Jaron Boots Ennis needs to knock out Stanionis to have a champion on that resume. Now, who knows what the narrative is going to be after this fight? Who knows? Some people might still think Boots is only fighting C-level fighters. Other people might think that he's the next big guy. You know, obviously, after the Brian Norman fight, everybody was like, he's not ready for Brian Norman. But at the same time, we got to also put into perspective that that fight's not happening yet. And overall, Brian Norman's resume is not, it's again, it's not any better than Jaron Boots Ennis, in my opinion. So there's really, in my opinion, look, Brian Norman had a great fight, but there's really not much to prove. There's really not much to prove. That fight can't prove what he can do against Boots. And vice versa. The fights that Boots had, he can't prove what he can do against Brian Norman, but that fight hasn't happened yet. And as far as Mario Barrios, he's got to run that back with Abel Ramos. So for me, this fight between Boots and Stanionis, like I said, it's going to determine who the number one welterweight in the division is. But overall, both of these guys need this win. Both of these guys need a champion on their resume to solidify them as the top dog. And again, we might potentially see it. You know, we're going to find out who the top dog is in 2 days on April 12th in Atlantic City. I'm telling you, this is going to be a good fight. And I'm absolutely pumped for this fight because this is what I love about boxing. I love unification bouts. I love it when two champions fight, put their belts on the line, and overall, the winner gets both. And then what happens is it evolves the division, it elevates it. It allows guys to make bigger fights happen. That's what I love about boxing. But we don't get too many of these, which is why I'm super excited about this fight. And overall, y'all should be too. It's going to be on DAZN again, April 12th in Atlantic City for the WBA and the IBF Welterweight Championships. Jaron Boots Ennis versus Eimantas Stanionis. Two undefeated fighters putting their undefeated records on the line and their belts on the line at the same time. Doesn't get any better than that. So with that being said, make sure y'all come back here after the fight's all done for the post-fight episode. Make sure y'all continue to tune into all the other prediction episodes, all the other post-fight episodes, all the other news updates, the breakdowns, the announcement episodes, all of them. Whatever you see on the Puncher's Point YouTube or on the Puncher's Point podcast, make sure y'all click them. Whatever you see on the Instagrams, the X's or the Twitters, the Reddits, the Facebooks, whatever you see, the threads, make sure y'all tap in with the content that the Puncher's Point is creating. And last but not least, make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point.